Vytas Buciunas, welcome to Radio Wolf. I'm very glad to be able to speak to you.
Thank you, Thomas.
Vytas, we met a couple of years ago at a conference in Kyiv, and I had no idea that a couple of years later we would talk about a war that is happening in the Ukraine. Would you like to say a little bit about your background and your relationship to the Ukraine, and just that people know where you come from?
Mm-hmm. Yes, of course. I'd like to start from one quick observation, because I'm afraid I can forget it. When we met in 2019 in Kyiv, the war was actually already going for 5 years. Mm-hmm. And people in many places tend to forget that. But the war that was a local war, but still a war. Now we have a different kind of, a different scale and different phase of war. Yes, so about myself, professionally, I'm an integral master coach and leadership development facilitator. This for the last 5 years. Previously, I worked in the financial sector for 20 years. And originally, I'm Lithuanian from Vilnius, but for the last 7 years, we've been living in Kyiv, Ukraine, together with my family. My wife is Ukrainian, so she's Kyiv native, and I'm directly connected to Ukraine for the last 11 years, so quite deep into the processes there that are happening there. Yeah, and together with my wife, we have 6 children for both of us, and 3 of them are Ukrainians. Like actually 2 of them are Ukrainians, but one is half Ukrainian, half Lithuanian. So our whole family is very much connected.
So as we are talking right now today, the offensive in east of Ukraine is starting. So the second phase of the war, at least of this part of the war. From your perspective, where are we after, as you're saying, this is not just a war that started right now, it's a war that has built up. It has at least started with the invasion of the Crimea. In the Donbas region, there's a local war since some time. There's the background of the whole dispute about NATO and Russian interests. And now we have this explosion. From your perspective also, as someone who lived in Kyiv for so many times, who has a Ukrainian family, but who also has an integral thinking about this, what are we experiencing here? What is this war about?
So you asked the question for a couple of hours at least, if we speak on a superficial level. There are so many layers to this situation, and we can approach it from very, very different perspectives. Speaking about how it is going, of course, since 24th of February, when the war started, when this large phase of the war started, there were very many surprises and things that no one expected. That they will evolve this way. And of course, the biggest surprise so far is the way the Ukrainians are fighting. Actually, pretty much everyone, even the experts, the military experts and the intelligence experts and in the West are absolutely shocked in a positive way of the decisiveness and the quality of military action by the Ukrainian army, and this makes us hopeful, if not optimistic. My wife is a Russian-speaking Ukrainian. She grew up in a family who was speaking Russian at home. And she of course is a Ukrainian, very patriotic, and And that's the way it was. Part of the people were just speaking Russian at home, thinking in Russian, but they were identifying themselves with the Ukrainian idea. And Ukraine as pretty much, in some sense, similar to the US, which is more an idea than a country or a system of ideas, and the main, I would like to now elaborate a little bit about the differences. What are the cultural and even in terms of mentality, what are the differences between these two nations? So the main difference, of course, is the approach to freedom and self-organization. So that makes a whole difference. Traditionally, in Russia, the society was always organized in vertical hierarchies and in very patriarchal and paternalistic kind of systems. There was always a Tsar with absolute power, with its heavy and difficult bureaucratic machine. That's where the corruption is coming from, and the ordinary people, so to say, they were always under some pressure. So the people who were more kind of freedom oriented, or those rebellious souls, they were always either having some problems, being repressed, or I don't know, being imprisoned or something, or they would emigrate historically. And part of those people were actually emigrating to Ukraine, because a significant part of the Ukrainian society is made of those people who were coming from Russia, from the main Russia, in different historic periods. And in Ukraine, there are very deep traditions of self-organization, starting from the Cossack organizational structures. They were always making those so-called circles in small villages, and they would always make collective decisions. And Ukrainians, they don't hold their bosses for long. Even if you see the history, those hetmans, I don't know exactly the English word. These are the local kind of the local dukes, so to say. I'll check very quickly. There are very few of them would hold for more than 2-3 years, because Ukrainians are always very critical about their bosses, including now the presidents. And whenever someone on the top wants to repress the society, and we saw good examples recently, starting from the Maidan in 2014, and another Maidan was in 2004. The society gathers very quickly and gets rid of the repressor, of the dictator. That we see with Yanukovych. And the Ukrainians would never, like literally never, accept the structure of the society and the structure of dictatorship as in Russia. That's why they're fighting so hard. That's why they're fighting with such a motivation. That's what this courage and desperacy and at the same the optimism is coming for, because they know that they're fighting for the core value, which is freedom. So Ukrainian society, by its essence, is a society of free people. Of course, that has another kind of a different side. With freedom, there should come enough responsibility, and in many ways, the Ukrainian society is not that mature in terms of living in those Western structures, but the process is going very, very fast. And if we compare Ukraine today and Ukrainian 10 years ago, these are two different societies in terms of maturity, in terms of carrying its own burden and responsibility. So these are two significant differences. One society is accepting that vertical patriarchal kind of management structure. And not only that, but there are many Russians on a cultural level, they are denying the value of freedom. They openly say that, okay, that's where all those problems come from.
That's my question. Do you think, does Zelensky say something about the Ukrainian society? He, as being an elected president, of who he is, and if yes, what does it say?
Yeah, that's a very important point you touched. Zelensky is a mirror of Ukrainian society. He's a very sensitive person. As a professional actor in his past life, he's a very sensitive to the demand of the audience. So his audience at the moment is all Ukrainian society. And in this sense, he is just executing the program that is demanded by the society, and he doesn't have much choice. Actually, I think for better, probably not for worse. He doesn't have much choice because he knows that if he plays the role which is not supported by the society, he will be removed and swept away like that. Literally, there's no problem for the Ukrainian society to organize another revolution, even in the times of war. And he knows that very, very well because he knows what is demanded by the society. So, for example, if he would theoretically, let's assume he would decide to go for some compromise with Russia, with Putin, that would not be supported by the society, that would be the end of Zelensky instantly. Mm-hmm. And that's an interesting phenomenon. That's one of the key factors which was miscalculated by the Russians, because they are used to the idea that the Tsar is always right, and Tsar can do whatever decisions he wants for the society, and the society has to swallow it. As simple as that. And even in our debates and arguments with some Russians in the beginning of all this, and even before the war, because after the war started, it became very difficult for us to really debate with Russians. But before that, this was one of the arguments. They were telling something like, "Oh, why do you think that your army will fight for Zelensky?" And we say, "Guys, you misunderstand that. Our army will never fight for Zelensky. They will fight for Ukraine. They will fight for their native land. They will fight for values, for the system of values, for their style of life, so to say."
So also as a final question, what do you think we realistically can hope for?
So my feeling from all the sources of information I have is that we will have very, very intensive battles in the upcoming 2 weeks. Maybe 2-3 weeks will be hot, and there will be no significant developments in the peace talks line, because Russia will be desperately trying to get at least some marginal victory. So I think by the around 5th of May, and then if they don't gain anything, I think they will not retreat. Then the whole warfare will go into this positional fight. When Russians will hold some territories, the Ukrainians will be pushing and more going from defense into offense. and then that phase can take up to several months if Russia is not going for really constructive position in the peace talks. And the Ukrainians are willing to agree, but not to any price. Not to everything we've been hearing from Russia recently was not realistic.
Vytas, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Thomas. It was a pleasure talking to you.